Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sandy Bob Blog Talk Radio Show. We are live from Wisconsin, and it is Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019. It is 12 o'clock noon Central Standard Time and 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And it's not too cold in Wisconsin today. It's 18 degrees, and it's snowing. We have accumulated about an inch already, so hopefully the sun will come out and it'll all melt. I lived for 17 years in Florida, so I don't think I'll ever get used to this. Today our show is about former Eckists tell their story, and we're going to have two guests on the show today. The first one is going to be Mike from Arcadia, California, and then we'll have Dean Val on. After we have our guests on, we have a call-in number for our listening audience. That number is 563-999-3509. Again, that number is 563-999-3509. Well, Mike, Mike is from Arcadia, California. And I understand, Mike, that you are a former Eckist with the corporation. And I'm going to ask you how you had come to finding Duane the Great Writer and come upon the song New You. How long were you in the corporation, Mike?
Well, let's see, from 1972 until about 2015.
Wow, long time.
Yeah, but there was nothing else around there, so, I found that through my dad, actually. He came in under Paul, and so he beat on me for, a couple of years, kept telling me, well, you got to do this, you got to do this. And of course, my dad and we didn't get along too well, and so I didn't listen to too much he had to say. And but he kept it up, and it became so annoying to me. And finally, I said, all right, look. I said, and by that time, Paul had translated, and Darwin had come on. So I said, all right, look, I'll pick a book. I'll read a book. I'll pick it. Just show me all your books. So he did. So I read this one particular book. That was the In My Soul and Free book. And something inside of me just said, you know what? You got to do something about this. And so I started. And one thing led to another. I met a couple of people who were very heavy into the legal area, and which I knew very little or nothing about at that point in time. I was working at a major corporation other than Eckists. And so I started getting involved with this gentleman, and one thing led to another. I found myself in the U.S. District Court battling the big boy, the IRS, and before that ever happened, I had already been warned. I spent a lot of time in one particular book of Eck, which Paul wrote. It was in Shariat too. And I came to some real heavy revelations. I had a lot of dream experiences, and the outer was just continuing to hammer on me, moving in a certain direction. I didn't know why, didn't know what the consequences or any of that was for, but I just knew I had to go that direction. So I wound up battling the IRS. I had a lot of really good experiences in that, and I hooked up with a couple of Eckists that were also into the law, and I began to learn things that most people don't even conceive of when it comes to our system. But my experiences with Eck were, I'll just say, profound. I had actual inner discussions during my contemplations with, at the time it was Darwin. And, nothing ever happened that was in a negative from between me and the Eck. And then as time went on, I had some really heavy revelations with Fubi, Fubi Kwanzi's one of the guides, and I discovered during that time my relationship with Eck that he was actually one of the masters dealing with the law, and so I was pretty confident about where I was getting my answers from. So as time went on, I lost my dad. I didn't lose him. He translated and went on, and then my wife, she was about not having anything to do with this group, and she was not just adamant. She was like, she didn't even want to hear the word. So we spent about 2 years of our married 46 years of marriage, not even talking. I couldn't even look at her and talk to her. She didn't want to say a word to me. It was that bad. And finally one day, after about 2 years of this stuff, she came to me and she looked at me and she said, "Honey," she says, "I am so sorry." I said, "Why? What happened?" She said, "I don't know." She said, "Something happened to me last night." She says, "I met with this guy, and I think his name is Rebisar." And she said it was so funny because I got a little distraction there. Sorry. She said he came to me and he talked to me and he showed me some things and he was sitting on a like a nightstand. His head was there, and his head was spinning around in a circle, and he's laughing and carrying on. And she says, just I guess I'm going to have to take a look at what you're doing. So from that point on, she became a member as well. Well, that took me through a lot of different things that a lot of people look at me and say, "You're crazy. I don't understand how you did all that." I lost my first house to the IRS, not because of something that I did, but because of the way the system had evolved, and it had become so corrupt by that point that I don't care how perfect on point with all of the issues and laws you might be, they weren't going to hear it, and they didn't want it shown, which is why. It just so happens that we finally reached a point with Bob specifically, who's on another blog, on a Sunday blog. In fact, we'll have one next Sunday. That we're talking about all this stuff now, and we're exposing the truths of what's really going on out there. So, anyway, that all come about. I lost my first house to the IRS, and I then went on with my exercise, my teaching, my chanting, all this stuff, and I still had all these revelations. So it was like I was in law school without being in a code law school, and I learned about property titles. I learned about our naturalization system. I learned all these things, and they were all based on our foundation. And finally, we got into our second house, which was actually my wife's father's home. And yes, baby, I got a visitor. So we lived there with him. We took care of her dad because her mom had passed, and we were there with him for I don't know, about 5 years. And finally he passed, and then we had some issues with the banking system, and I went through a foreclosure, all kinds of stuff there. And then I moved on. I was working for another fellow for a while, and after my wife passed, which was in 2013, one day, a young lady, she came down to the place I was working, and she was looking for someone to work on her car, but she was having a problem with the property next door to her, and she was really adamant about these people. It happened to be some Asians that had bought the property, and they tore down the house that was there, and they were going to do all kinds of crazy stuff to it. And she was just beside herself. They were going to cut all her trees down and do all this stuff. So she said she was talking to the fellow that I was working with, and he told her, "Well, you need to go talk to Pop." That's Mike. That's me. So that was our relation began right there. Well, it took about 3 months of back and forth, and she got really heavy involved with me and the process on claiming titles to land and stuff. And during that time, she knew I was part of some, we'll say, religious organization, but she didn't press it, and I didn't press it. I just, the books were there on the table, and she'd see them when she'd come over. Well, finally, one day she's looking at at the books, and she was a little bit concerned about the direction we were going because she actually works for the government. And I just looked at her and I said, let me tell you this. I said, I'll never leave you behind. I won't leave you hanging. I said, anything you need to know, can know it. It will not be you will lose all your fear of the system and all the garbage that's going on. So all of a sudden she said, well, let me know, how do I do this thing? So I gave her the phone number. She called, got the paperwork, and signed up for Eckists. And of course, at that time, it was under the head reptilian himself, and Harold Clamp. And so she started immediately doing the discourses and having really phenomenal experiences. She was getting the blue light, the sound current came on. She was doing her little out-of-body stuff, and she rides a train every day, and so she had a good opportunity to do that twice a day. And she was really growing fast, rapidly. And during all of that, one of the events that really turned the tide for our relationship was in the middle of her claim in this piece of property next door. She claimed a lot more than that, actually. But she asked me, she got through all of the paperwork and everything, all the posting and publishing and everything, and she said, well, what am I going to do now? And I said, well, you got one last step you got to do. She said, what's that? I said, you got to go over there and put up a post and put a sign on it of your claim that you've already mailed, you've already served it on the sheriff and the Superior Court. You've done all the stuff you need to do, but you got to put that sign up and take a picture of it. And she was like, all of a sudden, she went into this, oh, no. And, she just looked at me. She said, you know what? I knew you were going to say that. I said, well, okay. I said, but that's the next step. You asked me. I told you. So the next couple of days, she put her little thing together. And that night she went over and put the sign up. She actually put up a section of fence at the back of the property and put that sign on it. And she went back to the house and went to bed. And she laid there for about an hour. And she had a long talk with her gardener, who she's had here for many years. And he kept telling her, he says, oh, that's not a good idea. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. So she had this thing in her ear all the time. Well, finally she gets up, she goes over, she takes the sign down. And she brings it home, and she goes and gets in bed. She's laying there in about 20 minutes, and she said, you know what? She says, I knew I had to do it. I said, yeah? And what did you do? I got up and I put that sign back. Well, the next day, when she got up, there were the Arcadia police were here, some high-powered attorney from the lady next door, and they all ganged up on her at the front door. And she just stood there and held her ground and didn't get excited and explained a few simple things to them and let these people make complete idiots out of themselves. But the funniest part about it was, this little gal, she's only like, I think 5'2", and here she is with all these big high-powered, people around her, looking at her, threatening her, trying to coerce her and all, and she's just like, to heck with you. And it was like, that was her day of realizing and recognizing that there was something much more powerful going on with her than the average person. So our relationship just grew from there. And one day I was sitting in the kitchen drinking a nice cup of coffee, and for some reason this little voice came on and it said, you need to go find out what happened to Paul. And I'm thinking, So I went on and I typed in, what happened to Paul Twitchell? And the Google does a little search, and I come up with a whole bunch of different websites. And all of a sudden, here's one, and it was from the next guy who was claiming the position. That was supposedly, he was an Eckists as well, and had migrated out of the Eckists organization because he claimed that Rebisar had moved him to that position of, we'll say, the Mahanta, the living Ek master. But now he's a Mahanta, but he's in charge of Vardankar. They changed the name, they changed the sound, the word, and all, a whole bunch of stuff. And he starts doing discourses. He's just another corporation, just like Eckists. And but I knew that that Harold was something goofy there. So after all that time I'd spent, almost 40 some years in the corporation, I had to make the step. I knew I had to make the step. So I dropped that. I went over and I signed up for Vardencar, and I'm doing the things, and I'm having some personal experiences with Alan and Heather G. And she wanted me to help her with some law stuff, but she didn't want to take some steps. Unlike my little girlfriend, she had there was a fear button there. She couldn't get past it. So it was like I'm going like, there's something not right about all this, and I have not been able to I'll say, get the attention of the so-called hierarchy in these different groups, these two different groups, to look at what I was doing and what I was presenting for them. And in effect, it was like, you guys, you're all tied up in the system. You're doing all these things, and then you don't want to learn about it. You don't even want to know why you're where you are, what you're doing. And yet you're claiming your masters and you're doing all this stuff. And I said, you may very well be, but as I've learned already, just because you're claiming you're a master doesn't mean you are one. So I went through almost 2 years of Vardencar. And I'd actually gotten to the point where I'd requested a second through the Vardencar group. And something inside was that kept telling me, said, this is not right. You're still not quite doing the right thing. There's some stuff you're missing. These people don't want to help you. And it was a very difficult 2 years with this individual, with Alan. So one day, the little voice comes on again and says, you need to go look up, and I'm trying to remember what it was that I'm pretty sure it was Fubi was telling me, look this particular thing up. So anyway, I did, and all of a sudden there I see.
Mike, can I interrupt you just for a second? Your background chickens or animals or whatever it is are making so much noise we can't hear you talking.
Oh my goodness. I'm sitting here in the farthest remote corner of the world.
It's getting worse and worse. So just to let you know.
Really? Honey. All right, never mind. I'll go to another room. So, oh geez. I'm on the best mic in the headset, and I'm still getting all that stuff. That's okay. All right, is this better now?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, I got a cat on my shoulder and a bunch of pots and pans in my left ear. So there you go. Anyway.